Ruth Steininger. I'm the Senior Director of Academic Program and Support in Wake County Public Schools.
And I'm Marla Gaddis. I'm the Director of Instructional Technology and Library Media Services for Wake County Public Schools.
So our story today is really about being intentional. And I'll tell you, I know Marla threw me under the bus yesterday when she was on lunch with whoever she was with yesterday and saying that I'm her new boss. She had a different boss 4 months ago. And that one did know something about TPACK. It's amazing because my 101 came on the ride down here. Marla and I have been together for about a month and a half in the same department, and it was very intentional. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But what I'm seeing is that everything is incredibly intuitive, but unless you make it intentional, the intuitive piece doesn't really matter. And so that's kind of been our story, is to move from unintentional to intentional. All right, so just wanted to give you a little bit about information about Wake County, because I think it actually is important to our story. We are the largest school district in North Carolina. We're the 16th largest in the United States, and we have 150,000 students. That's rounded up from about 96 at the end there. 11,000 teachers. We are 33.7% free and reduced lunch. 171 schools, and I think it's important for you to see what type of schools that we have here. And what's people don't always appreciate is this piece right here. We operate under 7 different instructional calendars. We have year-round schools that have 4 calendars. We have modified, I know, it's crazy. And so when you're trying to move, and so that is really important because it's about moving a mountain. It's really difficult. All right, so Marla's going to segue into.
Yeah, so the interesting thing that we have to deal with, and I think that's been a pervasive conversation, is there's this gap, right? There's this huge gap between teachers going to professional learning and then teachers applying it in the classroom. And we see all the time, as a professional developer, as many of you are, we find a lot of times that we train, and then when we go out in the schools, we don't really see any evidence of what we have put out. And so for me, I was getting very frustrated. I've been in Wake County now for 8 months, and I've been in another large district within our state before that, and we were putting technology everywhere. And we had lots of professional learning, but we just didn't seem to see the depth that we wanted to see in classrooms. And so it then became this thing about, how do I become deliberate, right? How do I kind of write the playbook to make sure that our teachers are actually implementing the technology that they have in their classroom? So I'm going to take a little detour to 2011 when I went to the National Tech Conference, which is a fabulous place to learn, to connect with people. And so I was at the conference, and I was going through the session books, and I happened to come across a name, and it was Dr. Judy Harris. And in my graduate work, we had read a lot of her work. And so it's not often that you get a chance to meet the people that you read. And so I took advantage of that. And so I went to a session that Dr. Harris did, and it was about designing TPACK professional development. And so in looking at that, I sat in there, and I had one of those moments where you're sitting there and all of a sudden the sky opens up, this light shines, right? And you realize, oh, this is what I was looking for. And that's exactly the way I felt that day. And I came back to the district and got very, very excited. So what we wanted to do was move from unintentional to intentional. And what made sense for me was not the theory of TPACK. The construct did not make a whole lot of difference to me, but what made sense to me was the activity types. Mm-hmm. And when I saw the activity types, it very simply became that bridge between the two mountains of, here's what I've learned, here's how I apply it. Because a lot of times teachers say, I don't remember to include this particular part of technology. I remember I went to it, but I don't think about it at that point in need. And so for me, the activity types were a big document. But then what we realized was it wasn't enough. So we had resources that weren't listed on the activity types. They weren't specific enough for our teachers, and they were having some difficulty. So I took the opportunity to email Dr. Harris and Dr. Hofer and said, what do we do? I know you have a Creative Commons license that's non-derivative. Can I get your permission to add some additional pieces to that? And so what we came up with was basically what I call the North Carolina twist on the activity types. And so if you're looking at the document, this is just one piece. And just so you know, in our SkyDrive, all of the documents we created are within the SkyDrive. But what we did is we took their document and then added our North Carolina essential standards for information and technology. We have many strands within that, but one of those is technology as a tool. And so we aligned it to that. And then we also looked at some of our district-approved technology pieces, devices, software, resources in general. And it was meant to be not an exhaustive list, but it was meant to begin to give teachers some context of things that they're going to, things that they're learning about, because they were tool training regardless of whether we wanted them to tool train or not. They needed to have that ability. So we kind of started to create that. In the meantime, I left that district and I came to Wake County. And when I came to Wake County, one of the questions that I was getting as I was meeting with principals throughout the district was, what do I purchase next? What do we buy, right? Because what's the latest, greatest thing? How do I become the cool school? And we realized that we had some work to do. And so trying to figure out how we got a shift. And so when you're a district like Wake County, to move, it's really like moving a mountain every time you want to make change. And that's just any large district. If you were to talk to any large urban district at all, they're going to tell you that creating changes is very difficult. So one of the things that we started talking about was, again, the move from unintentional to intentional. And so looking at our staffing. So I'm over technology and instructional technology, and I'm also over library media services. So we pulled both under one department. And as we've had some conversation, thanks to David, about the importance of that, we're starting to look now at what their roles are in the school. And we're also looking at how they can support teachers in a more coaching ability. Because we have technology contacts in each school, but each is funded very differently. And so we really have to look at kind of a general job description for that. And making it more instructional versus the technical person that fixes things when things don't work. In the meantime, before I got to the district, they had already put in a budget case to create what we call the instructional technology facilitators. So we have a 4-year phase-in program with 171 schools saying I want a new one person in every school as a multi-million-dollar line item. So that had been tossed out many, many times. And so the academics division got very smart when they wrote the budget case and said, we're going to phase this in. And so we were fortunate. It passed budget this year, and we had an application based. Our schools have been chosen. We're waiting on the North Carolina state budget to be determined, and then we will apply that. So we're hoping that there will be no further cuts so that we can keep these positions. But the plan with this work is that we will do some intentional work through TPACK, through resources, through coaching, through instructional needs and planning to tie those in together. So one of the things is we really had to look at changing that focus. So from what do I buy to what do I want my students to know? And we've had that conversation in many schools and in many meetings. We've had whole focus groups really talking about how do we change this. So I'm going to let Ruth kind of talk to you about some of the processes from there.
So when you, we've talked a lot about the bottom-up, top-down kind of approach, and we have, and I think I mentioned earlier about a young lady that we have in our district, Katie Gimbar, who's done a lot of work with flipping the camera. So we've got pockets of great things going on. And when you talk about organic, I mean, we've got a lot of organic stuff going on, but we recognize that if we really are trying to improve student learning, which is what is the core of all of our work, then we have to be more intentional about it. And I do believe that the use of digital integration would enhance their learning tenfold. And I just, when Marla came to our district, the first thing she asked me was, what do you think needs to be our work? And I said, we need to increase the level of student engagement. And I do believe that the partnership that we have now will help with that. It's the connection of the content with the digital integration. So we got real intentional, again, about reorganization of central service staff. And when I go back, I am going to ask our boss, Todd Wirt, what was he really intentional about? Because he's not really talked about this, but I was at one point the senior director of middle school programs, and I had library media services under my umbrella. And I interviewed for it for 2 times and couldn't get somebody to fill the position. And so he said, well, let me take it, and let me reframe it. And so I know now he had her in mind whenever he was reframing that. And so he reframed it to be instructional technology and library media services, which was masterful, we got Marlo, and now Marlo, he then created a new department, the academic program and support, which he would say was designed for me, which was very flattering, but it's nice because it's a very innovative, creative department, and I get to work with Marlo. And so we're doing some great connections about the digital integration with content. And so what we saw was that we needed to be real intentional, and we need to take a look at first what we had, and I'm not going to read through all the slides, but what we want to determine our entry point. So taking into consideration all that I've just said, what will be our focus tool? And that was something that I was reading online with regards to TPACK about the ease of use, what folks have had prior experience with, the high flexibility and affordability and access. All right, and so what we knew is that we had over 100 schools using Discovery Education. But they were using it really just for the streaming of videos for the most part. That's how I knew it as a parent. My kids would come home and watch a video through Discovery Ed. And if you know Discovery Education, there's so much more to it than that. And so what we established was a teacher leader core. We thought this could be our entry point, the use of Discovery Education. So we had a big kickoff with principals, and we engaged them in learning activities so they could see more of what Discovery Education had to offer. We're partnering with Discovery Education on this, and had them buy into, or had invited every principal to be a part of a district license, and they all did. Because they had to cough up a little bit of money, but they were willing to do that. And so now every one of our schools has access to Discovery Education to the full degree for which we know Discovery Education can be used. So we had a twofold purpose: to enhance the use of widely used digital resource in a more productive way, and the development of teacher leaders in every schools to create learning labs demonstrating how to effectively integrate technology. So those were the two primary purposes of the teacher leader core. So if you look at this journey, this is a great graphic that Discovery Ed, I believe it was Discovery Ed, created for us. It's going to be a 3-year commitment. Every school chose 4 teacher leaders, and we gave them a job description, if you will, some list of characteristics of what we felt like would be appropriate in choosing a teacher leader core. And so every school, every one of the schools, K-12, chose 4 teacher leaders, and they're going to go through professional development. And down here it's kind of small, but it reads, they receive quality professional development, and in that professional development, and actually Discovery Ed has taken their name out of this. Even though we're using their resource, this is where we're doing the connection of content, pedagogy, and technology, all right? So every single professional development that they come to, these 5 days of training, we're making these purposeful connections. And then there's an expectation that they'll go back, the 4 of them will go back and deliver these modules back at their school. So again, when you're talking about a district as big as ours, you have to figure out a way to get it to matriculate down to every school, which is a challenge. So again, it's a 3-year commitment, so it's something that it's not trying to just do it once, 1 year, and then think that everybody's going to be masterful at it. It will build over time. So, bigger than that, this is a big what we did not, while this piece here is absolutely critical, it has a clear purpose though. It is helping teachers understand how to appropriately integrate digital media into their content. Well, we recognize that we got a bigger problem. Somebody mentioned this earlier about common language. I heard someone say that. Well, what we have not defined is, what do we believe are the skills of an effective teacher? I mean, again, this is another intuitive thing. As a principal, I used to be a principal, you go in, we used to define it as with itness, right? Okay, so you got with itness, I'll put that down on your PGP. I mean, you gotta be able to give teachers more than that, so they understand how to develop their skill sets as a teacher. So we are creating a framework for effective teaching in Wake County. We worked with Dr. Fran Pullman to help kick that off. She's out of Virginia, actually. And designing a shell of what we wanted our effective teaching framework to look like. Now, we're now starting to own it. So this first year, central service staff was trained. Marla was part of that, because what we know is that if we don't get the people, this was a result of our implementation of Common Core. Who did they turn to when they didn't know what to do with Common Core? They turned to central service staff for support. So initially there was this thought that we would roll out effective teaching training to teachers or to principals first. And we're like, we really have to get the people who they rely on educated first. And that was very smart, because they gave us good feedback on how we could modify the training to make it even better for principals. So again, it's a 3-year commitment At the end of this, we'll have what's called an effective teacher coach. Now, go simultaneous with me for just a moment. This year, we have Teacher Leader Corps. Those 4 teachers, we're building their capacity in a particular area. At this year, this will be the second year of the Teacher Leader Corps, and it'll be the year we're identifying effective teacher coaches. Are you with me? So there will be a lot of those Teacher Leader Corps members that could potentially be our effective teacher coaches. They will have already, acquired a skill set that moves us forward. Okay. So here are the graphics that that help you get a visual of what our effective teaching framework looks like. So this graphic here is out of the Skillful Teacher. It's
Yeah,
this
right
little,
here.
there you go.
Skillfulteacher.com.
There you go, skillfulteacher.com. And these are what they call areas of performance. We're calling them critical elements. And then you have these large domains here, and they align with, like curriculum planning aligns with all of these elements here. So we are being very intentional about helping our principals, helping our teachers understand what it means to be effective. And so what you'll see tied into this is not only the integration of technology, but all sorts of skill sets. So let's click here, and it shows you, and this is still in the making, just so you know, so it's not, you see that? That's good enough. You see that there? So this is not populated yet. We have a design team that's helping us develop, because we're moving forward now to principals and teachers the following year, about being real purposeful and helping them see, when you talk about curriculum design, you gotta consider all of these elements. What is your mode of delivery? Okay, your pedagogy, right? How are you gonna deliver this? What tool are you gonna use to build their capacity? What is their experiential activity? Now these are all about developing a skill. It's not about developing a lesson. Are you with me, the difference there? Okay. So, but these are very intentional to help them understand the criticality of doing curriculum design. But this will be a resource for teachers, for principals. And so up here at the top, these are one-word items that represent the elements of our teacher standards. And so if you went down to facilitate, which is standard 4D is the one that teachers integrate and utilize technology in their instruction. So if a teacher needed to build their capacity in that area, you'd click on that substandard, and it would take you to a page that has recent connections, which would be some resources that you could use. There will be videos, there will be professional development you can attend, there will be articles you can read. We will populate this with we will maintain a blog. There'll be a Twitter account. They can, we will have opportunities for them to rate each of these resources that they use. So this will be a working document, a live resource that will help teachers build their capacity in each of the standards as it aligns to the areas of performance of the skillful teacher. So that's our framework. Does that make sense? Because we knew that we had to make it matter to them. And what matters to them, I mean, I would love to say that everybody just is altruistically, is altruistic and wants to be this phenomenal teacher, but we have to be real purposeful about that. Again, intentional. And so if we make the connection to their evaluation instrument, we feel like we get more bang for our buck. All right, and then here is something that we've had for a while, and this is CMAP, is our curriculum management application system. So if you click on one of those items, you would get into a much more detailed unit plan for teachers. We had this before we had the effective teaching framework, which is problematic, I think. I mean, I think this is about helping them develop their lesson, and here's where we get into, but once we help them understand how critical it is to be a teacher that is masterful in standard 4D, integrating your technology, integrating technology into your content, they may not pay attention to these resources that we have over here and understand how important it is to link that tool to the task. So we've had this for a while, but now once again, we'll be more intentional in those connections in our professional development and in our development of effective teaching framework.
So I chose this one on purpose in looking at it. So you heard we've been focusing on content, and we've been focusing on pedagogy, and we have some focus on technology, and we're trying to build these all together into TPACK. It hasn't been intentional until really in the last 6 months or so. But one of the things that we have really realized is it's really important for our teachers to understand that sometimes technology is not the right tool, right? So one of the things that I will say is when you're looking at this, sometimes that T for me stands for tool. Sometimes I think we get bogged down in technology and we have to look at the right tool. So is there a right protocol? Is there physical tools that we need to include in that as well? So the T in TPACK really has multiple meanings. And really looking at this tool knowledge, knowing the right tools. We use a lot of the national reform protocols and those types of materials too. So how do I know when to pick the right tool? And it's really about finding the right tool at the right time for the right learners. And we've talked a lot about personalized learning in here over the day, but that's really what, for us, TPACK means. Mm-hmm. It becomes that framework for being able to do that. So this is our story, and it's just in the beginnings.